When people talk Jane Austen on screen, there's one adaptation everyone agrees on: Pride and Prejudice 1995. 6 hours of perfection, Colin Firth in a wet shirt, and a miniseries so good it basically reset the bar for all period dramas. But for every masterpiece like that, there's something like Persuasion from 2022, where Anne Elliot gets turned into a wine-drunk Fleabag knockoff. So today, I'm ranking every single Jane Austen adaptation, from the ones that defined a generation to the ones I'd rather forget. It had been a while since anyone tried a proper Persuasion, so you'd hope for something decent. On paper, the casting actually looked solid. The screenwriters were well established. But it goes off the rails almost immediately. This is Austen's most mature, most sensible heroine, and they turn her into a chaotic mess, making wisecracks, pouring wine, and breaking the fourth wall like it's some sort of a Fleabag audition. Instead of subtlety or restraint, Anne Elliot is now saying things like, "Sometimes I have this dream that a giant octopus is sucking my face. Seriously, I'm not joking." The entire dynamic with Wentworth just feels off, and the dialogue tries so hard to be clever, it ends up painful. The relentless breaking of the fourth wall gets old fast, constantly explaining to the audience what's going on, like we're actually that stupid, even though the actors could have carried it with a glance. Maybe it would have worked as a comedy, but as an Austen adaptation, it's just a mess. Poorly done indeed. Mansfield Park is already the least loved Austen novel, but you'd think someone would manage a halfway decent adaptation by now. Here, Billie Piper is cast as Fanny Price, a character who's supposed to be shy and determined. But you'd never really know it from this script. Piper does what she can, but it's all uphill. A bunch of the best scenes from the book are missing. There's no ball, just a limp picnic. Major turning points are skipped or watered down. Instead of Fanny being sent home to Portsmouth, which is huge in the novel, she's just left alone at Mansfield Park. The supporting cast doesn't help. Henry Crawford barely registers, and Edmund is more sleep-inducing than ever. There's just nothing to hold on to. Even the dialogue feels like it's apologizing for itself. A total missed opportunity. In comparison with the extraordinary 1995 version, this one sadly was never going to win. Rupert Penry-Jones is actually a solid Captain Wentworth, but that's about the only highlight here. Sally Hawkins usually brings a lot to the table, but her Anne is so awkward, constantly tripping over herself, literally running after Wentworth in the streets of Bath. The tone is heavy, gloomy, and awkward. There's that infamous kiss at the end, which was supposed to be a payoff, but just ends up feeling forced. Persuasion is Austen's most romantic novel when it's done right, but this version feels flat and a little desperate. Even the side characters don't escape. Mary Musgrove is more grating than ever, constantly complaining about her connections. In the end, it's just a dour adaptation that doesn't trust its own story. Andrew Davies is usually reliable for Austen, but adapting Sanditon, the unfinished novel, was always going to be tricky. There's not much material to work with. The first episode sets up the town and all the main players, but after that, it's mostly invention. What follows is a mix of classic Austen and not. There's totally unnecessary nudity, there's a sex scene on a marble floor, and the chaperones seem to have taken the season off. It just doesn't feel much like Austen, honestly. But credit where it's due. Rose Williams makes a believable heroine, and Theo James is solid as Sidney Parker. Too bad they cut him off in season 2. The show also brings in Austen's first black character, Miss Lamb, which is worth noting. The show has its moments, but you're never quite sure what you're watching. Emma is the one Austen story that almost always works on screen, even when people try something modern with it. Clueless is a cult favorite for a reason, and even the Emma-approved web series wasn't bad. The 2020 film looks great. The color palette is gorgeous, the music's playful, and Anya Taylor-Joy and Johnny Flynn have real chemistry. But there are times when the stylization gets in the way, and it feels like it's trying to force a fresh spin on a story that honestly doesn't need one. The nosebleed in the proposal scene is a good example. Funny, but distracting, like, why would you even do this? Still, it's an enjoyable adaptation, just maybe not an essential one. This came out the same year as the Gwyneth Paltrow film, which was just unlucky because back in the 90s, TV budgets couldn't compete with what movies could do. You can see it in the production values, but honestly, it's not a bad adaptation at all. They even managed to give us 2 parlors. Very respectable for the BBC. Andrew Davies handled the script, so no complaints there. Where this one struggles is Kate Beckinsale as Emma. She's competent, she's got the lines down, but there's something missing. A bit of the warmth and mischief that Emma needs to make the character sing. Then you've got Mark Strong as Mr. Knightley. He goes full-on stern and serious, almost too much so. You end up wondering if Emma's going to get a lecture every time she walks in the room. Still, it's solid, just overshadowed by its more cinematic twin that year. Next up is the 2009 Emma, the 4-parter with Romola Garai. Every Austen fan's got their favorite Emma, and for a lot of people, this is the one. Sandy Welch wrote the script. She also did North and South and Jane Eyre, so she knows her way around a classic. What really works here is the longer runtime. It actually gives Jane Fairfax and Frank Churchill the space their story deserves, and you even get more on Isabella and John Knightley, who basically got tossed aside in the 2020 film. It's a warm, comfortable watch, the kind of series that just wraps you up for 4 hours. Emma and Mr. Knightley are a little more modern, but it works for them. Michael Gambon is fantastic as Mr. Woodhouse, and the costumes are beautiful. Top-tier BBC work all around. Number 8 goes to Mansfield Park, 1999. Now, if you love the book, this one's probably tough. Fanny Price is easily Austen's most divisive heroine. Nobody's fighting to play her, and this movie just skips trying, basically turning Fanny into Jane Austen herself. That said, characters aside, it's a well-made film. Johnny Lee Miller makes Edmund a bit more dynamic, and the story actually leans into the darker elements of the novel, especially the stuff about the slave trade. You get a real sense of how the Bertram's money came from the West Indies, and the trauma Tom brings back from there. The script even quotes the debates about slavery in England, which adds some weight. In the end, it's a bold take on Mansfield Park. Maybe not the most faithful, but there's no denying it's at least pretty interesting. At number 7, we've got Northanger Abbey from 2007. This is Austen in her 20s. Playful, satirical, all about a teenage heroine with a wild imagination. Andrew Davies handled the adaptation again, and he keeps it quick and light. The movie isn't afraid to play up the gothic daydreams. You get dungeons, sliding panels. Catherine convinced there are vampires lurking in every hallway. There's a fun back and forth between her fantasy and reality, but it never turns the story into a joke. The cast is stacked. Felicity Jones and Carey Mulligan, both before their Oscar nominations, are already turning in great performances. And J.J. Field as Mr. Tilney basically guarantees you'll end up rooting for him. He's just impossible not to like. The whole thing just works. Youthful, funny, and genuinely charming. At number 6 is Love and Friendship from 2016. Kate Beckinsale didn't win everybody over as Emma, but she absolutely owns this one as Lady Susan, Austen's original anti-heroine. This is based on Lady Susan, one of Austen's early works, and it's a totally different tone. Witty, sharp, and almost gleefully devious. Lady Susan spends the whole film scheming to find the best match for her daughter, and honestly herself. Beckinsale is clearly having the time of her life in every scene. She's clever and ruthless, but still incredibly watchable. The writing is fast, funny, and director Whit Stillman really leans into the comedy, giving the whole film a breezy, modern feel without messing with the language. The supporting cast is spot on, and the costumes are once again perfect. This one's just fun all the way through. Proof you don't need a 6-hour miniseries to nail Austen's vibe. Emma 1996 is one of those films that just works, even with the odd misstep. I mean, yes, Ewan McGregor's wig is pretty much the stuff of legend, not in a good way, but as far as Emma adaptations go, this one's tough to beat. The movie looks gorgeous, actually won an Oscar for its score, and the screenplay gets a lot of things right. Gwyneth Paltrow and Jeremy Northam were the first to really make Emma and Mr. Knightley feel like real people on screen. That final proposal under the oak tree is still one of the great Austen moments. There's also a strong supporting cast. Sophie Thompson as Miss Bates is fantastic, and the movie gets the balance right between comedy and romance. It's not the most talked about Austen adaptation these days, but honestly, it deserves a lot more love than it gets. This adaptation of Persuasion is maybe the most quietly romantic Austen film, and so far it's the closest anyone's come to getting the novel right. Originally shown on BBC Two, it's slower paced than most of the later versions, but the trade-off is worth it. Characters feel lived in, the atmosphere is spot on, and nothing feels rushed. Amanda Root plays Anne Elliot with a lot of warmth and intelligence. You get everything you need from her with just a look, without turning Anne into some kind of desperate, wide-eyed, tragic heroine. Ciarán Hinds as Captain Wentworth gets to show both the anger and the romance, and the chemistry is always there. The ending lands too, subtle but genuinely moving. If you want a version that captures the spirit of the book without the bells and whistles, this is the one. This is the adaptation that really splits opinion. Some people swear by it, others want nothing to do with it. Joe Wright's movie doesn't quite have all the humor or liveliness of the novel, but what it does have is style. Keira Knightley's Elizabeth Bennet is magnetic, and Matthew's Darcy is a different take. Quieter, softer around the edges, but it still works, just in a different way. The cast skews younger, and the world is more lived in, a little dirtier than earlier versions. Wright actually banned heavy makeup for the Bennet sisters. Keira Knightley and Rosamund Pike perform with absolutely no makeup on their faces. He also made sure the costumes looked lived in. Notably, Elizabeth's petticoats are shown covered in mud after tromping through fields, a detail drawn from the novel's famous line about her 6 inches deep in mud. It's a far cry from the shiny 1940s version with the hoop skirts and stuffy dialogue. But this one feels closer to the actual book than most. Visually, it's just beautiful. Sense and Sensibility is one of those rare adaptations that does almost everything right. Emma Thompson took a novel that's actually pretty hard to adapt, the dialogue isn't always there on the page, and some of the characters barely have lines in the book, and turned it into a genuinely great screenplay. She got an Oscar for the writing and a nomination for her performance, both well-deserved. Thompson and Kate Winslet nail the dynamic between Eleanor and Marianne. To make the Dashwood sisters feel authentic, Ang Lee had Emma Thompson and Kate Winslet actually live together during filming. All the imperfect men get their moments too. Even the minor characters like Margaret come alive here. There's a warmth to it, but also enough bite to keep things interesting. Andrew Davies' 2008 miniseries is good, but this movie just has something special. No real surprise for number 1. 1995's Pride and Prejudice is the adaptation that basically defined the genre. Andrew Davies' script manages to keep everything that makes the book great: sharp dialogue, wit, real chemistry between Lizzie and Darcy, and the whole thing just feels effortless. 6 episodes, not a moment wasted. It's not just the love story, it's the way every supporting character gets their moment. The series became famous for the sexing up of Austen, mostly thanks to Colin Firth in that wet shirt. But even with that, it's still an incredibly faithful adaptation. And it's sure not Sanditon-level sexiness. There's this simmering attraction here, but nothing too explicit. If you ever want to show someone what a great Jane Austen adaptation looks like, this is still the one.